Okay, hi everyone. My name is Shreya Jimenez. We're gonna start off first by introducing the wonderful Tucson Language Justice Collective who's here with us. They will be doing live interpretation. If you're unfamiliar with live interpretation, you're gonna click on the globe icon and select which language you would prefer. It works best if you stay in one channel, and if it's working correctly, you'll hear Maria on the line interpreting everything we're saying live in Spanish. So we do ask that everyone please speak slowly so we can allow them a little bit of time to interpret. So welcome. We're gonna do our unpermitted casitas presentation. We're gonna try to go through this really quickly because I think we're gonna have a lot of questions on this topic. I also want to make, well, I'll do introductions next after the agenda. We're gonna have a live poll and then we'll have about an hour for conversation. So again, just our guidelines, please try to speak slowly to assist our Spanish interpreters. Please try not to use the chat or interrupt the presentation till we're in the discussion time. We'll have 60 minutes, so there's plenty of time for questions and answers at that time. And when we are in the discussion, please turn on our cameras. It's greatly appreciated. And we just want to make sure everyone's respectful and people may or may not have done things that are legal or illegal. We just want to be very sensitive to everyone's situation and know that no one's here to get penalized or in trouble. We're here to try to solve problems and work through the issues. So yeah, we just want to make sure everyone's sensitive to each other and the level of experience and knowledge level. Okay, so introductions. I'm Shreya Jimenez. I'm with Cuadro. I do drafting and design work. Wesley Fawcett Cree is also with me. We worked really hard in partnership with the Pima County Community Land Trust to secure grant funding for this info session and upcoming workshops, educational series. We're being funded by the Vitalist Health Foundation and the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona. And we are also, of course, partners with the city of Tucson because we can't, really do anything as far as building without the city and the city's involvement. So we have right now on the line, Dan Bursick. Dan, do you want to say hi?
Sorry, I had to find the mute button. Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Bursick. I am the section manager for code development for the city of Tucson, planning and development services. So great to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Maggie is the director of Pima County Community Land Trust. Maggie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Maggie Amadotes with the Pima County Community Land Trust. And if you'd like more information on what we're doing, besides the Mi Casita project, please let us know. And welcome. Thank you.
I'll pass it off to Gigi.
Yeah, I'm Gigi Eldridge, project developer with the Pima County Community Land Trust. We appreciate all of our partners and Shay and Wesley, and thank you to each of you for joining us.
And we have a new member on the Piclet team. We have our ADU project coordinator on the line. Geraldine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Geraldine Aramburo, and yep, I am new to, this is now my second day with Pima County Community Land Trust, and I am the ADU coordinator. So I'm excited to come on board.
Awesome, thank you, everyone. Okay, I think I've got everyone. We have a few other folks from the city. I see Acacia and who else? Is Lauren on the line also? Seamus? Okay, all right, well, that's it for now. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so I was on mute, sorry. These are our project goals. We've gone over these a few times. I'm just gonna skip through this. Here we are in our series of focus groups. We're almost done. We're at the legalized stage, which is this conversation, how do we legalize unpermitted ADUs? But this could also be a larger question about just structures that are unpermitted in general. And again, we have the city online with us to help answer these very technical questions that are going to come, more than likely come up. Our next series and last series for this focus group session will be on the land trust model, and that'll be it for now. Okay, and then, sorry, we're just gonna breeze through this part too. Okay, so there, we do want to update you all that I think in part, to everyone working on this process so far, we have some updates. The separate utility meters are no longer going to be required for ADUs. You can now tap into the existing utilities on site, which is a huge cost savings. So that we have gotten clarification on from development services, which is great. So that's good news for everyone. That's about, as we've talked about before, anywhere, from $15,000 savings, probably depending on the size of your project. Maybe even 5,000 if you're on the super small size. And also there's been a clarification that the sustainability ordinance, which is like the EV charging station, the solar readiness, and the gray water, will not apply to, is not gonna apply to existing structures. So if you're doing, it's only gonna apply to new construction. So if you're doing a remodel or addition, is this correct, Dan? Is there a distinction between remodel versus addition?
No, it would be for existing structures. One thing that, just to clarify on the EV charging, the EV charging plug would only be ones that have the parking next to the unit. You can get a waiver if you have on-street parking or no parking, which most units that do qualify for either a waiver of the parking or to put it on street. So there are some waivers for the new units as well for EV charging.
Okay. I just want to reference again really quickly the impact fees, the impact fee calculator we've talked about in previous sessions. You can kind of start to estimate those costs. And this will come up later because we'll be referencing them. And then here's another reminder, again, what we've already talked about with the ADU versus the sleeping quarters. So we're trying, I think, to get these more in alignment where the guest house isn't going to cost you, or the ADU hopefully will start to come in closer to the cost of what a guest house would be. And so, sustainability ordinance is applicable. I mean, this, again, there's a nuance here with the ADU. Yes, if it's new construction, no, if it's existing. Guest house, no. Permit fees applicable, yes, for the ADU, and yes, for both. Impact fees are, yes, still applicable for the ADU and not for the guest house. And separate utility metering required is going to be no for both, which is great. And then the full kitchen, again, is the main difference between them at this point, which is yes, is allowed for the ADU. And then the size restrictions are there and the differences between them. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the amnesty program, which I, again, am not an expert on. So I will rely heavily on Dan and our city partners here. But I'm going to breeze through it again really quickly, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty next in the questions. So a permit is going to be required for establishing a new dwelling unit. Either new construction or conversion of an existing structure, pretty much no matter what you're doing, if you're trying to build a dwelling, you need a permit. And you're going to need construction documents and a site plan for all of these examples. And so pre-existing unpermitted dwelling units have the opportunity to go through a limited time amnesty program. And it's operating right now on a case basis, and you know, it's all still in development, and we have development services number there below. So your best bet is to call them and discuss all your project details with them. And so, but we're going to go through a quick few examples of kind of what they've been working on and what they're seeing come through. There's some really common types that we're going to see. One of them is this attached porch or garage conversion. So here you have partially a shell of something already built out that could be converted. So in the best case scenario, the structure was already permitted. You have permits for the actual structure, and now you're going to go through and try to convert this into a living space. And the benefit of the amnesty program here, if you've already gone ahead and done this, is that your any fees associated with the permits will be waived. So you won't, and violation fees associated, yeah, so your fees will be waived for that. Because normally if you, did I miss a slide? Normally if you, I think that's in one of the benefits, but basically normally you would be charged twice the permit fee for building without a permit. So you're saving yourself money there. Okay, and another example is this detached sleeping quarters conversion. So there's a lot of people who have guest houses already, who have added kitchens, maybe without permits. And again, you'd get the fees waived in that scenario. And another example is like an detached accessory structure, like a shed or a workshop or a hobby room. Yeah, so basically the benefits are that, you know, so in this example, if you had a 642 square foot ADU, you would have approximately $2,000 in penalty fees waived. So participating in this program also legalizes the ADU, which allows the property owner to obtain separate utility meters if you want them, and or a separate address. And it also allows you to resolve any legal issues with the sale of your house or potential financing problems. And then, and now also sleeping quarters can now basically legally add a full kitchen. So for some people, this might be a very small project. So how do you tell if your casita qualifies? So your casita would have to meet the requirements of the ADU requirements. So the 10%, up to 10% of the lot size is up to 1,000 square feet in gross floor area, 12 feet maximum height. It's got to be located in the rear or side yard if detached. And you've got to meet the setbacks. And if you don't meet the setbacks, you can apply for a DDO, which is a separate process, which I've never really been through because it's quite lengthy and you have to notify all your neighbors, and it takes, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 3 months, and it's not a guarantee either. It's kind of also case by case. So so the other way that when I'm trying to get out of or trying to work around setbacks, the other option you have is if you can get that neighbor who's on your property line, whoever's adjacent to the encroachment, whichever neighbor that is, you can get them to sign a letter that says they're okay with the encroachment, and that's the easier, quicker way to get that done. So those are the two ways with setbacks. We've discussed the neighbor sign off and sent that form out also in previous info sessions. So steps to determine the amnesty process. So I guess basically what was described to us is there's really two separate kind of there's two different types of projects within the unpermitted projects category. There's some projects that they do have permits for the underlying structure. So either you have a garage and you have those building plans and you have the, you know, the drawings, And so it's easier with those projects because you already know what's there. It's already been through the city. It's already been approved. It's easier to get those projects permitted after the fact. I think what's harder is, and what's going to be a much larger project is if the structure you're using or converted if none of it was permitted ever, and you're starting, for the first time with a fully built structure, and you've already done the conversion or you've already added the unit, in that case, you're kind of going to have to go back and drop everything, the existing structure plus whatever modifications were made. So again, it's going to be easier if you're working with a space that was already permitted in some way. And you can go to property research online and research and look up your address, and you can find all the records there for building plans and any work that was done on your property. And the City of Tucson Rehab Fund. So this was mentioned also in the last.
Sorry, Shay. I just wanted to mention real quickly related to property records. The property records online is generally just the stuff that's more recent, like 15, 20 years. If your home was permitted before that, we do have records, but they're like microfiche records. So you'll have to put in a records request and then we would get that for you. Just related to what happened at Mayor and Council today, they did just give us a whole bunch of money to digitize all of those. So hopefully that'll happen in the near future and that'll be really helpful for finding records. But we're not quite there yet. But yeah, that's how that would work.
Thank you, Dan. These are excellent updates. And yes, thank you. Excellent clarifications.
I have a quick question just to piggyback off of that. When did the records, at what year did this permitting process even become formalized in the City of Tucson?
So they go back really far. I was able to find permitting records for my house, and my house was built in 1936. I will say one thing you can do as well is that if your casita or ADU was built before I think it was 48, which is when our first zoning code went in place, you can potentially get that legalized without having to go through this process. So there is that possibility as well.
Okay, so that's the grandfather cutoff date. Okay, because I had that question about there are things that do get buildings that do get grandfathered in, but usually it's buildings that happen before a code update or before a zoning change. Okay, so in this case, it's 1948. Anything built before 1948 will be technically grandfathered in. Okay.
Yeah, so long as it hasn't really changed. I mean, if it's expanded a whole bunch since then and things of that sort, that's another thing. But yeah, that's the cutoff date.
Okay, excellent. These are excellent clarifications. Thank you. Okay, so steps to determine eligibility with the amnesty program is if the structure, okay, so if was the construction of the structure permitted?
I think we did this one, Shay.
Did we do this? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. City of Tucson Rehab Fund. Oh yes, there we go. We're on the rehab fund status. This was something that went into effect with the passing of the ADU ordinance, that the city wanted to put some money towards helping people with unpermitted, potentially with unpermitted structures. So and helping people rehab these ADUs. So it's in process, but we still need final approval, and HCD won't have access. This is all going to be administered and overseen by the City of Tucson Housing and Community Development Department, also known as HCD, and their number and contact information is there. And it's in progress, and it still needs final approval. But they're hoping that by maybe fall of this year, it'll get rolled out. And HCD is going to do all the intake and determine all the eligibility for this. And preferences will probably be given to projects where 10,000 will make a significant impact. Okay, so we're done with that. Let's move on to the live poll, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Yes, so we just have a few questions we thought would be interesting to oh, the slide went away. So I'm putting the link in the chat right now. Olive.com/. So we're just really curious about who might be actually on this call encountering this actual situation. Okay, right now I have the link. So if you're able to take a few minutes right now to do a live poll, I'm going to share my screen so that we can kind of watch the results come in. And yeah, it will just help. Not only will we share this information with our partners at the city, but will also help us kind of tailor the best programming to address these issues within kind of our cohort of Tucson residents. So yeah, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. And I'm going to present. And so some of us, a quarter of folks more have an unpermitted dwelling unit on their property. And of those folks, about 75% are not converted space, 25% are. And then no one seems to have yet one that is totally new construction, which is good because as we've outlined, the city is still, and Dan can speak more on this, the city is still trying to figure out what the amnesty process will be for those more complex situations. Are you interested in going through the amnesty program? So that's split 50-50. What are the main reasons that made you to decide to construct this dwelling unit without permitting? So yeah, first is lack of info to know how to navigate the process. Okay, well, it's switching up, but the choices were time, cost, didn't think the project needed permits, and then I inherited unpermitted construction. So all of these questions and obstacles have been coming up a lot. So it's just interesting. It's interesting right now that time is number one, because that is something we've been hearing a lot. And I think we have one more slide. Maybe people are getting to that still. You can always share this in our conversation too, but what additional resources or assistance would you need to participate in the amnesty program? Okay, so I'm gonna stop my share. Money is a big one. I'm gonna stop my sharing my screen so we can just jump into the conversation, but thanks for taking a moment to fill that out. And yeah, I don't know, Shay, if you wanted to share your screen again, we can look at the prompts, but I have a feeling a lot of folks are already coming to this conversation with questions.
Yeah, just really quickly, basically just want to know, more about your projects and then what resources or maybe even potentially what aspects of, zoning or, the process would need to be changed to help facilitate you getting your project legalized. So any and all input would be great. I see, Bill, your hand is up.
Yeah, I wanted to do a couple of clarifications. I asked Dan the question during the presentation that the fees that are waived are not the original fees. It's just, I'm sorry, I'll get closer.
I'm gonna stop you. Yeah, I'm gonna stop you and ask.
I'll get closer.
Yeah, sit closer and speak a little slower, because every time our interpreters are a little challenged by your microphone.
So during the presentation, you talked about fees being waived. And the fees that are waived are just the fees the penalty fees. The original fees for permitting are still in effect. So it's not that you won't pay anything for permitting. You will pay the original fees that everybody else would pay, but your penalty fees would be waived.
Yeah, that's correct, Bill. That's my understanding as well. Yeah, you're saving yourself the penalty fee.
Because coming at this as a person that's going through all the permitting and paying all the fees and spending all this money and making sure that everything's right. I'm looking at this as it shouldn't penalize the people that are permitting. So I'm just hoping that this doesn't encourage people to go unpermitted and then later try to go through the process later and get the amnesty, go through the amnesty, because the cost of permitting is so high and the process is pretty slow that if you just build it and then later on go through the permitting fee or go through the amnesty when you can, I just want it to be fair for the people that are originally just going through all this, the process the way you're supposed to.
Thanks, Bill. That's a good point. Dina, I see your hand up.
So with this, so if we've inherited, I'm not sure if we went over this, but if we've inherited, I bought a property a couple of years ago and it already had a guest house, if you will. It was on the side. And it had its separate meter. So it does have its separate TEP meter. And it has electricity to both units, the water shared, but not the electricity. Do we just go to the city and pull the you know, the existing permits and see if it was permitted, if that additional unit was permitted? Because what happened is that a tenant, I believe they received something from, this was during the height of COVID. And I called the city a few times and nobody's ever responded. But anyhow, the property doesn't have an address. So they have a hard time receiving mail. But, you know, it does have, you know, like I said, it has TEP and whatnot. So they do receive their TEP bills. I know it's kind of lengthy, but I was wondering if that would be like a case where I would go to the city and, you know, do some research.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the first places to start. Yeah. Yeah, and more than likely, if you don't have an address, my guess is it wasn't but then if they went and got something through TEP, I mean, the laws have changed a lot over time. That's the other thing that makes things even more confusing, because I feel at one point, like, things were just a lot easier. I'm sorry, this is my personal opinion, but also from my grandpa and people in that generation who I've talked to, it used to be ridiculously easy to permit things. Like, you could literally go in with like a little napkin sketch and kind of get all your questions answered in one day and just kind of get the sign off. So it's not like that anymore. So a lot of stuff was done, you know, between like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, even I'd say, I feel like we went through the big change when we updated to the UDC, the Uniform Development Code. That's when a lot of the setbacks changed and a lot of things changed at that time. And the utility departments are doing things differently now too. So
Well, I was able to get the panel upgraded with the permits. I got a permit for the panel upgrade with the city.
yeah, so more than likely, at least portions of it sound like they were permitted at different points.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Oscar's hand up.
Yeah, Thank you. I have a question about the public records request form. I pulled up the form and I started filling it out, and I wanted to know at the bottom it has to check off the box for the type of record. What record would we check off, or what box would we check off if we wanted to see like if there was permitting for like a conversion of like a carport into a garage or an additional bathroom that was added on? Where would that come out? That would come out like in the floor plan or in the site plan or in inspection results. What do you know what has to get checked off? So I just check all 4 of them off to get those records?
So Oscar, sorry, Shay, I'm just going to jump in real quickly. I would just check all 4, get all the records for your property, and then you have that information. Because you just want to be able to check all that, and you don't want to actually check on 2 of them and then not have what you need, and then have to wait again for them to go and pull that for you. So yeah, I would just check all of them.
Yeah. When you used to be able to do it in person, like sometimes a lot of those documents are like the C of O maybe, or like, so I was always looking for plans specifically myself. So I would not check, but I think it's a good idea to know everything you can and all the history about your house. So I completely agree. Just check all the boxes. The only thing that kind of sucks is you have to pay for all that. That's why sometimes I didn't check all the boxes, because you have to pay for reproductions or whatever, copy company you're working with, whoever's doing the printing, you have to pay for all the printing and for all the scanning and whatever has to be done. So, but it's best, I think it's just best also to know everything you can. I see Therese, your hand up.
Hi, good evening. I have one little question for now, which is just maybe Daniel can clarify what he said earlier about grandfathering something built before 1948. My home is 1907, and my plan for this conversion is an old shed, quite frankly. It's just under 300, it's about 300 square feet. So it's also very small. And so that's part one. And really quickly, the second part is like, what are you grandfathering? Are you so is it now I don't need to get a permit or what? Thank you.
No, of course, yeah. So I'll clarify a little bit of this. It's more related to zoning code stuff. So it sounds like a shed because it's not an inhabitable structure. You would probably still have to go through and bring it up to at least some sort of code, so it's make sure it's safe. So it's not an has it already been converted? Okay, and you don't believe it's been permitted, but you're not sure, I suppose.
It's always been on all of the mats and plats and all those records as a unit. And it's been over 10 years, and I've had to replace the roof and keep the water out and put electric in, so that's where I'm at, and I'm afraid to do anything further. So yeah.
It's probably similar to kind of some of the other things we talked about, where it's best to go and get the records for your property to get an understanding, because it's possible that it has been permitted at a certain point in time as a.
But it's built in 1907.
Right, and so it's entirely possible it was permitted in the 70s or 60s too, right? So as an ADU or a dwelling unit or something of that sort.
No.
You don't think so? No.
No.
It's newer than that?
No, it's not new. That's what I'm saying. It's old. I'm sorry. Maybe I can call you offline or something. I don't want to take up time for other people.
Of course. Yeah. No, let's feel free to reach out to me. We can work through it, and I can reach out to the appropriate people. We can try to figure out kind of what the process would be for something that may have been permitted or not permitted in 1907 or something of that sort.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna put my my phone number and my email address in the chat. So anybody who may have questions or need anything, just feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to try to help with this.
Thank you, Dan. Did we want to go back to Vicky? Vicky, did you want to ask your question that you put in the chat so I don't misunderstand it?
Okay, here I am. Sometimes these ADUs are so in such bad condition. If they need new sewer lines or water lines or HVAC, is that all fundable under, some kind of a grant?
Dan, do you want to take this in case I am mistaken? But I think the rehab fund would be, that we discussed earlier, would be the only one. And I think they're still trying to figure out what specific projects they're taking on.
And then I had another question come up too. Who is the ultimate decision maker on when it gets like, what is it going to get, a C of O? Is
Yes.
fire and health department and all those folks going to have to inspect one that's been illegal?
Yeah, so it'd have to go through the permitting process, make sure you get permits for it, and then you would have to have inspections related to make sure that it's up to code, up to whatever the requirements are, and that it meets the code, or meets
all the fire and
yeah, that it's safe.
Okay.
Essentially, to make sure that it's safe is what
Okay.
the goal
All
is.
right. Okay, thank you.
And then I saw another question in chat really quickly from Carlos Flores about how long it takes to permit. It really depends from start to finish. By the time you hire a draftsperson or you draw the plans yourself and submit them, that process is usually a couple months. You're gonna, even if you're doing this yourself, you're gonna have to do the same investigation an architect would, or a draftsperson. Get the records, find out what the structure is, where the plumbing is, where all the utilities are. So that process takes a lot of time to put together. So that just putting together the drawings is like a 2 to 3 month process. Then after that, and design processes, when you're doing custom designs, they just take a lot of time. And then from that point, once you have your plans like good to go, ready to submit, then the city has up to 30 days for the first round of review, but it's working days, so weekends aren't included. So that's anywhere from 4 to 5 weeks. And then you typically always have comments. Like I have yet in my career to submit plans and not had comments on my drawings. So then that extends and then it takes you time to pick up the comments and revise the drawings and change them and do all the deltas. And then at that point, so really from start to finish, by the time you start plans and then get an approved permit, it's hard to do it in under like 6 months. Like pretty much it's like 4 to 6 months. 4 is like if you were like really super clear on what you were doing and you had plans already, or your project's really small maybe. But typically if you're doing like just a ground up new construction, anything I'd say over like 300 square feet, you still have to show the mechanical plan, the electrical plan, the plumbing plan, it just, and then all those get reviewed. And so it's not any less time, even though it's smaller. It's actually, and that's what I'm finding, because I'm doing everything from as small as like 300 square feet to as big as 1,000 in this range. And they take just as much, these projects take just as much time, I feel, as it does to do large multifamily construction. So, so it just takes time. I mean, it is faster, but than larger projects, but it's still at least a 6 month, turnaround. So, but again, all those variables can vary depending on your project team, who you've hired, who you're working with, if you're doing it yourself. Like, there's just a lot of, factors to consider, how fast you can turn things around if you're doing it all yourself. But yeah, I see Dora and Tito on the line. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Dora.
Oh, hi. Hi, everyone. So I had a quick question about the ADUs. We have two different projects going on, our personal home and my mom's home. And in my mom's homes, we have a unpermitted housing situation where where I lived for many years. It was our garage and our laundry room stuck together, and we kind of just opened up the wall in between them and made it a big space. All the electrical is done right. The roofing's done right. We're working on putting a kitchen in, but it is connected to the house. Is that still considered an ADU, or does it have to be disconnected from the house?
It has its own separate entrance and it has its own separate bathroom.
Well, is it completely, so if there's a door connecting the two houses, it could be in the addition category. It could be considered an addition, but you still need permits for that. And then technically, but if it's completely walled off and they're completely separated, then you would be in either a guest house category or a ADU category.
What's the best way to categorize it or to go about it to make it permitted faster, more, I guess, to like expedite the process? Is it better to keep it as a addition or to close it off? Because we have options, right? We can close it off completely and it's its own casita. So that's the direction I'm thinking about going. So is it more beneficial to leave it as an addition, do you think, or to leave it as an ADU?
I think in terms of value, I mean, that's a hard one. I think in terms of like value and what's going to add more value to your home, I think a separate dwelling will add more value to the home.
Okay.
And as a rental, it's more valuable to some degree because it's private.
Gotcha.
But as far as which process is easier, I don't think that either of them are going to be, they're all equally going to be as hairy.
Personal choice and what you're thinking about in the future for that space.
Yeah, I don't think there's any easier way to get any of those through permitting, like, because they're more or less, they're all the same, it's all the same size, you know? The size doesn't change. The only thing that could be less expensive would be to do it as the guest house, because then you would avoid the impact fees and you would avoid the, that would be the biggest fee you would avoid. But other than that, there wouldn't be much. I don't know. It's hard to say.
But in a guest house, it has to be like a kitchenette, right? And not a full kitchen.
Yes, correct.
And then one more question, Shay. So if we were to leave that unit as an addition, we would have to do the penalties, because that's not what's it wouldn't be an ADU, right? It wouldn't be. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's a good point. I don't know. I don't know if, I think this might be specific to the ADU.
I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question here.
So it'd be better to just call it.
That is a really good question. I actually think the way it was passed by mayor and council is that it's only really related to the ADU. So you may actually be awash with the amount of money for the impact fees versus the penalty fee, and you may be worth just going through doing the ADU. But yeah, that's really interesting. I don't think I had thought about that. Again, and I do want to stress that we're learning about this as well right now, because there's such a wide variety of different types of projects that have been done out there. So I really appreciate all of the feedback, and we really just want to work kind of with you on this to try to figure out really the best way to do it. So I really do appreciate it.
And last question is, well, would rammed earth and like Adobe bricks be an approved building material for these ADUs?
Yeah, you'd have to follow the building code. There's it's considered a mass wall. So, but yeah, there's a section for Adobe in there. Was that it?
Sorry, yes, thank you, everyone. Really
All right,
appreciate it.
Joan Thomas.
Hi, thanks so much for this. And I really appreciate the news that we don't have to have separate utility lines. That was going to be a definite stop for us. Our situation is that when we moved here in 2012, we bought a great property with a fully permitted detached studio in our backyard. Not realizing we added a countertop stove in what was already a small kitchen area. And I guess that's a no-no. So we're trying to figure out which way we want to go here. I guess one question we have is, if we decide to just maintain it as, I guess, a guest house or a detached studio, do we just remove that cooktop and go forward?
Yeah.
That's
Sorry,
it.
go ahead, Shay.
Go ahead, Dan, you first.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to check with our building staff and review staff, but my thought is that as long as it is built to whatever code is, which would be removing that cooktop stove, you should be in compliance and it should be fully permitted. Yeah, and then your other option would be, obviously, and this is the kind of the best case scenario when going through the amnesty program, would be the one that's fully permitted as a guest house, but wants to basically, or has already converted it to a full kitchen. You wouldn't have to pay penalty fees, but you would still have to go through with, the impact fees and things of that sort, which can, add a
Right.
considerable cost.
Right. And we did go through the process. We filed an application for a building permit and received a pretty detailed comments, and then spoke with our individual, and he was great. Answered questions, but it's hard to know what to ask. And I know that there are limitations as to what you can offer. So that's a little bit of a struggle. But for instance, there was a statement that we had to meet 2018 code with the building, and the building was built in 2005. Is that still an issue?
So that actually concerns me a bit. And again, like, we're trying to learn about this to see. I think it might be advantageous for me to look at your comments and us to talk about it, to kind of see, how this turned out and what we can do potentially in those situations. Because to me, it sounds like if it was already permitted, the goal of this is to basically take that permitted structure and just upgrade it. And that's, updating it to the 2018 standards doesn't really seem like it meets the intent of what we were trying to do.
Right. So if we're just needing to permit the cooktop stove, we could prepare a plan for that piece of the kitchen that would show the circuitry and where it is. And I know we can talk with you more. I don't want to take time here, but it would be more limited. We were under the impression that we would need to do more. So this is kind of exciting that we may be able to go forward with this.
Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead, Shay.
I also, Dan, offline, I would love to clarify and get DSD clarification about existing structures, because from my understanding, as long as you're in like a level 1 alteration, you can use the international existing building code. So I don't know why they've been slamming the new code on everyone trying to do like an existing remodel, because a remodel should be easier and faster to get through the process, because you're not, the way I interpret the code, as long as the cutoff is like, it's like if you're renovating less than 50% of the house, you're not required to be updated to the most recent code. You can use the International Existing Building Code, which is a shorter version of the code. And so again, but I've been hearing this a lot where people are getting slammed with that there's been no none of these nuances discussed. So I think it would be, this is a great point to just bring up with development services and see how they're interpreting things today, because I've used the International Existing Building Code with projects in the past where we were doing minor alterations, like exactly what you're doing, like swapping out a stove for a hot plate, or that should just be such a minor review. I don't know, I'm not sure what's happening in that department these days.
Well, so I will say that, you know, last time when we met, definitely the feedback that we received was related to the separate utilities and things of that sort. And I kind of came back and we met and we were able to kind of, you know, make some adjustments on how we're interpreting things, especially with the building code. So and again, you know, we went through and did all the zoning code stuff. And I think that there was maybe not a lot of, we may not have had as much communication as far as the transition between the zoning code changes and the building code. So the more we learn about this, the better we can administer this program. So I'm actually meeting with our interim building official tomorrow morning. I can bring this up with him and we can talk a little bit about it. The intention really is to take the feedback from tonight and talk a little bit about kind of how we can move forward. So Joan, if you don't mind either direct messaging me your address or reaching out to me or send me an email, I will bring it up with him tomorrow when I talk to him.
That would be great.
Could I comment on Joan's situation? Because that situation affects so many people that have sleeping quarters, got permitted sleeping quarters, and then they add the kitchen afterwards because it's such a big pain in the butt. My question is, what are the consequences or the how does it hurt someone to have that and you just own the property? Does it hurt you when you're trying to sell the property? Or how does it affect you to have that full kitchen after you have it permitted as a sleeping quarters? Does it affect you just when you sell it? Or does it affect you otherwise?
I can kind of speak to this. Yeah, I think the biggest disadvantage, the biggest issue is generally when you're selling or someone's trying to get financing on your property to buy it, if it's not actually appraised properly. So there's appraisal issues and things of that sort. I mean, I guess potentially if it's not permitted, someone could put in a code violation on you, and you would be required to remove that stovetop. I don't foresee that necessarily happening. I'm not sure how anybody would actually know, but there's, I guess, issues kind of related to that too.
So this is just hypothetical. Say that you have a sleeping quarters permitted, you put in a full kitchen, and you just know that when you sell, you're just going to take out the full stove, you're going to take out the full refrigerator, you're going to go back to that 6-foot countertop with the bar sink and the under the countertop refrigerator, and then you're back to a sleeping quarters, so that until you sell, you just have your full kitchen. It doesn't affect you. Hypothetically.
If my only question, and I don't know about at all, but would there be issues with homeowners insurance if any sort of fire or accident occurred because of that appliance? Potentially.
I'm not an insurance agent or work in insurance, but it sounds like that could be an issue. Yes.
So the question is whether you that's who you should be talking to if you don't want to go through the expense of what Joan is about to do and try to get this permitted. Instead of going through that hassle, you talk to your homeowner's insurance agent and ask if that's going to be affected. And then if it does, then you do go through it. Or you just sit there with your full kitchen and wait till you sell it. Hypothetically.
Dan probably cannot comment on that. Do we want to hear from Josefina?
Good evening. Thank you. Senor Dan, I'm hoping that everything that's being discussed is being on record and being worked on, because I'm concerned concerning the grandfather clause date of 1949. Is that correct? Am I getting that date correct?
48.
It was, yeah, Josefina, it's 1948. 1948 was when our first zoning code went in place. So a lot of times you'll see structures that were built that don't meet our current code, that don't meet setbacks, a lot of things of that sort. So that's that date.
Well, for the records, Barrio Kroger Lane in 1980s and 90s was in the city rehabilitation program. So a lot of homes were renovated and also homes built. And structures were left on the site as casitas, as so it's after that date. So if they were left by the city of Tucson, would they qualify and be in a grandfather zone? Because in the past, I've also heard that there's no such thing as grandfather.
So it's a legally non-conforming use, essentially. I would have to take a look specifically and see whether or not it would fall in as a legally non-conforming use there. But I can take a look for you, Josefina. I'm happy to do that.
All right, thank you.
Of course.
I'm not sure it was next Vicky or Dina.
I've got my questions answered. Thank you.
Okay, then Dina.
So I've got a question. Sorry, I'm just not trying to beat a dead horse here, but so for that particular property that I was mentioning, when we purchased it, I mean, it has a full kitchen. The property was even rented out to Section 8, the one unit. So it did get a Section 8 inspection. So it would be considered an ADU, right? I'm not, the only reason that I don't know if it's permitted or not is just because of the address issue that the tenant had, right? So I have not done any additional research on it, but so the zoning is correct. It's an R2 unit or the lot. Would it still qualify for the grandfathering, or that, would the same guidelines still apply if I were to go and get the try to get it permitted? And then would they, because like I said, when I bought the property, it was already in that condition. We did upgrade paint, do all of that fun stuff. But anyhow, would they, I've never faced this issue before. So would I have to like tear down walls or anything, or, drywall?
So it really depends on the situation. If it's completely unpermitted, a lot of times they would have to they will require you to do a little cut in the drywall to get an understanding of how electrical's set up and things of that sort, because you can't really see until, I think we were in a conversation the other day where we were saying until we can actually x-ray walls, it's really hard to get an understanding of how the electrical was set up, and they want to make sure that it's safe. There's not going to be fires and things of that sort. So it really depends on if it was permitted, if it's not, and how they set it up. If it's conduit on the outside of the wall, maybe they don't have to. But if it's behind drywall, then they may need to. Dina, I'm happy to, again, I know I keep saying we're happy to kind of look into this for you, because it's an interesting situation. I'm not entirely sure without looking at kind of the property, but it sounds to me, especially if it was a Section 8 voucher or Section 8 exception, that it may have been permitted and for some reason there was no address. I'm not sure.
Okay,
But we can, I think, we'll have to take a look at the records and kind of see what we have. But that's probably your best bet to kind of move forward with this.
okay. Should I just reach out? Should I send you a private message?
Yeah,
Would
feel
that
free
be
to send
okay
me a
with the
private.
address?
That'd be fine. Yeah, that'd work.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course.
Excuse me, I don't know how to raise my hand. I just had a quick question if I could ask.
Go for it.
So I have a duplex that has a separate standing garage, a 2-car garage. And I'm wanting to convert that into a living unit or a living space. I have drawings and it already has the electrical in there. So I would need to connect the water and the duplex is on a septic tank and each side has their own septic tank. And so I have 2 questions. Would I be able to connect them to the sewer lines? And this is in Pima County, not in the city, sorry. And my second question is in regards to the drawings. I know that I have, and I know that the garage was permitted because I have the drawings and then there's some stamps that saying that they were approved. But since the water is not connected and neither is the sewer, would I need to then have completely new drawings or can the water and the sewer be like, I guess, added to those drawings?
So this is related to the county, so I'm not entirely sure. And it's more related to building code. I will say that I have more of an expertise in zoning code than building code. Shay, you may actually have a better understanding of how to do a garage conversion than I. Actually, I'm sure you do.
Well, if you already have plans, it helps, right? Like that helps the draft person or whoever you're working with to have some more information, but whatever is being added, that has to be drawn up. You're gonna need new plans regardless. So and it's pretty extensive, like even though there's existing stuff on site, like you're gonna need to show a plumbing plan and an electrical plan. You're gonna need to show everything for the new work. So that all has to get drawn up and permitted. So, and because you're doing new construction, and this is where it's really great, Dan. I'm having a hard time myself because basically I think the way that the city is interpreting it now is that because all you have at this point is a shell, you're adding, I think because you're not in the level 2, like if you already had a guest house and you already had the kitchen and you already had the bathroom and you already had everything, that's a much smaller like upgrade and renovation. But in this case, you're adding more than 50%, which in that case, you're past like a level 3 alteration. So then then you have to conform to new building code. So then you would be required to conform to all the latest and greatest building code standards. So you're looking at a pretty big project. So basically at that point, you want to get it drawn up, you want to get it, permitted. And and it helps that you have existing building plans, but it's still going to take someone time to drop all the new kitchen, the bathroom, all those things that are going to be required, and you're going to have to meet my guess is you're going to have to meet 2018 building code and our most current codes. But Dan, this is where it gets gray because you have partially a shell there. So would they consider it an existing building or would they consider this? I think either way, you're in a large enough remodel and renovation that you're going to be required to conform to the most recent building code.
I think in the city you would. I'm not sure what it is in the county, but because I think you're right, Shay. I think because it's a shell and you're pretty much, it wasn't previously an inhabitable space. It wasn't like it was, yeah, you know, I don't know, a family room or something that's being converted or something of that sort. I think it probably would require that. One of the things that we are looking at kind of a waiver for would be if it's like an existing kind of structure, you wouldn't have to necessarily do the solar readiness or some of the, especially, or the gray water, which is nearly impossible to do on an existing structure. So those are kind of some of the things that we're looking at as far as allowing for you to not have to do that versus new construction, but it would still require probably bringing it up to current code.
Okay, thank you very much.
And so Carlos, who is also on this call and is a drafts person, seemed to concur with that. But he had a question earlier. Do we also need to apply for a wastewater utility permit? I understand that is a separate permit. Do either of you know, Shay or Dan, or anyone on this call?
Yeah, it is. It's a separate permit. I mean, well, it gets reviewed. It gets reviewed when you go through the building permit process, but yeah, you have to pay those fees. But it's not, it's not a, honestly, this is where I don't usually coordinate that piece. That's usually the builders do that, the contractors I work with do that piece for me. So I'm also less familiar with that piece. But my understanding is whenever I've submitted plans, you know, it does get reviewed. I've always assumed it's getting reviewed also by the water and electric.
Hey, I just went I just went through this process. I just got my my inspection approved this past week. I tied into the existing sewer, and I passed all my inspections. So, and I don't remember an impact fee for. I mean, I know every project is separate. Mine is a existing, just converting an Arizona room into a one bedroom and just adding a bathroom on the outside. So I'm not sure. I mean, I know every project is an individual project, but I wasn't charging an impact fee for that.
Yeah, I think the review is part of the combo permit when it comes through. So I'm not sure if you're going to see it as like a separate permit that you have to do because we kind of combine them all together. So I think it's built into the whole process. So you wouldn't have to necessarily go and do that separately, if that means anything.
Yeah,
Part of the rough plumbing.
For residential, I think that's a good point, Carlos. I think for residential, it's all that's how I've been operating. I haven't seen it be a separate, but they do sometimes have different rules depending on what you're doing. Once you get into multifamily, that's when sometimes things can start to change with the water department. I'm going through this right now because I have a client who's doing a lot split, and there was some additional hoops we had to clear to get, you know, through the water department with the way they wanted to, even that affected the shape of the lot split. And so, and the way they do metering now and utilities, anyone doing a lot split, you have to have now your water lines and any underground utilities have to be on. You can't have any utility lines crossing somebody else's parcels. They have to all be on your own lot. So then that means that you end up, if you're doing a lot split, you end up having to do this weird shape where you have this like long skinny line going out to the right of way where your water meter will be. So that was something that came up recently. But again, once you get into multifamily, things get more complicated. But for residential, as far as I've experienced so far, everything gets reviewed at once. You know, TEP, they do prefer when you've talked to TEP before you submit your permit and you've talked to the water department before you submitted your permit, but they'll review the permits and you can kind of sort that out. in my experience, I prefer to sort it out when we're in construction because that's when we actually get field verification of where the lines are anyways. So I prefer to sort it out in construction, and I'll just do a plan revision if we were wrong in our assumptions on any of the utility meters. But that's, again, everyone has their different way of doing things. So I don't, you know, maybe other people have other advice.
I have one more question about utilities. So the garage the electric for the garage is connected to one of the units. And to get the garage on its own electric, then that also requires permits? Or do I just go through the electric company for that?
Well, in this case, that was the update we got. So do you want a new electric meter, or are you okay tying into the existing panel and doing like a sub panel for the new residents?
I was just assuming I was gonna need to have a separate panel for the garage.
Okay, well, that was the update in the beginning, that as long as you meet the requirements of the, the ADU, you can tie into the existing electrical panel. So that would be the cheapest way to go.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Dina, did you have another question?
I did, thank you. This time I'll go on a totally new project, not that same one. So I've got a question regarding permits, and Dan, I know you said that you have more experience with permits. So for this particular, if I were to choose to do an additional dwelling unit at my mom's property, right? It's my property, but my mom lives there, so it's not a rental. She doesn't rent from me. Would I go about doing it as an owner, or would I still have to hire an electrician? Because our son he remodels properties, so we've done it plenty of times. Or would I have to hire another company to do it? So the question is basically, how if you're doing it on your own, like on your own home, it's a different process than hiring. So that would be my question. Would it qualify under that category, that it's our own property?
The distinction in the code is what the zoning code says is you can do the owner builder. The only time you need to absolutely hire a licensed general contractor is if it's for rental, right, Dan? That's correct.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so since it's my mom's property and it would be for one of, another family member, then we would be able to do it under owner.
Yeah, if you would have whoever the owner of the property is, they need to pull the permit. So whoever's name is on the title,
so
they would need
mine.
to pull the permit as the owner builder, and then I think you're in the clear to hire whoever you want and do the work yourself.
Okay, perfect. And for so this is I was on the last ADU meeting. This is my second time attending. So thank you for doing this. I only heard of this, of the ADU, the allowances, if you will, recently. So the setbacks, where can I go to get more information regarding setbacks? I know that that you mentioned getting an exception from your neighbor that was closest to the setback. And then I had a question that I entered on the chat. I know that like Home Depot has pre-made little dwellings, if you will. Does one know that, yes, you know what, go ahead and order it because we will give you that allowance? Or is it kind of just, how would I know if I would get that allowance?
What do you mean by allowance? Like, you mean that it would be approved by the building code?
Exactly. If it would be approved.
That's the problem with those little structures, is that like even Tough Shed has like disclaimer on their website. I think that even though those little tiny structures look a lot like houses, and you probably could do it under the radar and just order one, like sometimes they could be difficult to get. You still have to get all those to pass building code. So you would still have to submit the specs and their drawings and their specs. You'd have to submit those to the city. And at a minimum, you'd need a site plan. I mean, that would be the custom part.
Okay.
You need the site plan to show you're in conformance with the setbacks and the zoning. And, we went over that in previous meetings too. So maybe Wes, we could send that link out to Dina, because we went over kind of the pros and cons of some of those prefab structures. In a lot of cases, by the time you price it out for Tough Shed to actually add the insulation and add the AC and add, there's a lot that's not included in their price, and they don't do any of the site development work. So they're not going to put in the line for you they're not going to coordinate anything with the utility companies or do any of the underground trenching. So it's hard to say whether or not it's a cost savings or you're just better off like building the same small square footage yourself out of stick frame stucco construction. I don't know, but you would have to submit for any prefab structure. You'd have to submit all their plans and their specs and all their engineering to the city. You'd still have to go through the whole process. And like I say, it may be easier just to do a ground up, a building from the ground up, and hire somebody to do it.
Okay, only just because we buy and sell houses. So we've done a lot of the stuff, a lot of permitting, I've done a lot of that stuff, but everything's so darn expensive right now that building something from the ground up is almost the same price, right? Of course, I have to take into consideration the air conditioning, all of that fun stuff, and then the trenching, like you said. But I was just wondering if it would be worth getting a permit for it prior to even ordering it. Just so that I don't go through the expense of ordering it and then it comes and it's like not permitted.
Dan, you have a comment?
Thank you for the information.
This isn't necessarily related to the Tough Shed kind of prefab conversation, but this is a clarification on the setback issue. So setbacks per six, I'll post it in the chat. You can get a reduced setback with the authorization of your, adjacent property owner, but it's only for accessory structures, not for accessory dwelling units. So just wanted to clarify that. You can do it for a guest house or a sleeping quarters, but not this. It specifically says that. So you would have to go through the design development option, which again, it was part of the process, and people were concerned about just kind of, they wanted notification related to that if there was reduced setbacks. So that was the reason why that became that. But I will post it just so you all have record of it. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a new one. That's a new nuance to remember. I'm trying to go back. If anyone put a question in the chat that we haven't addressed yet, go ahead and type it again or ask it out loud. There's been a lot of conversation in the chat.
Oops, wrong one.
Yeah. You have a question, Therese? Is it Teresa or Therese?
Teresa's good. Yeah, I do actually. I don't know how to lower that thing, but anyway. So I was so excited when all this came about and everybody lobbied for this. And as it unfolds, I just want to make sure I'm interpreting what's going on correctly. As it unfolds, I know there's a lot of things that we're discovering and how we're going to do it. And one of the things that seems to be unfolding is that there's the benefit is no penalization. There's no benefit to building or legalizing a smaller structure, you know, to help, I mean, to provide additional housing, to provide additional income. And it doesn't, I guess I'm wondering if there are any discussions happening around perhaps looking at the permitting fees. And I somewhat understand that if it's the same amount of work, that's why they don't want to do it. But this is all about a smaller structure. And, you know, I don't know, I'm just like, I'm trying to understand. I know a little change is good, and I want to be patient for a lot of change. And so, yeah, that's one thing I'm thinking. So, and more, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, just real quickly related to that, Teresa. Yeah, so I understand the frustration about this, and I think the goal was really, you know, to allow for these in a situation to where you know, we weren't getting people that were coming in building guest houses or sleeping quarters and then adding in a kitchen afterwards, or just doing it and not getting it permitted. And I know that it's, you know, there's a lot of barriers, and it seems like there's additional barriers to permitting these that are causing us to kind of fall back on what we were doing before. And it's money. Yeah, you're right. So I will say that we were, you know, mayor and council did direct us to kind of start this program and then come back to them, I think in a year or two, with feedback and letting them know that. So all this information that you're providing to us, and I doesn't necessarily help you right now. And I know Bill and I have talked about this, but when we do bring that back to them, that, you know, it could potentially lead to additional incentives or additional kind of help or changes that would make it easier in the future. So your feedback is really helpful. I know that's not necessarily comforting to you in your current situation, but we will be looking at this again.
I think it's wonderful that you're listening. So thank you for that. That means a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Teresa, I just wanted to add something that we've mentioned in a lot of these past focus groups, that Tucson is definitely not on the cutting edge of passing these ADU ordinances, you know, so there's a lot of cities and even entire states that have done similar things before us. And what we've typically seen in those other cities is that it takes years for them to kind of work it out and eliminate, you know, enough obstacles that enough people can finally start adopting those ordinances where it starts actually making an impact. And I think that's, you know, Tucson's in a fledgling stage of that. But that being said, I think there's a lot of groups that are looking, in the city included, but looking at ways to build in affordability. I mean, that's part of this project that Shay and myself and our project partners, Piclet, are trying to undertake. Our next focus group on the land trust model plus ADUs is, you know, that's gonna be a really kind of interesting brainstorming session, as well as looking at other cities that have those two models combined to kind of boost affordability and access. So yeah, it's the beginning, but I think other people have the same concern and are trying to find pathways.
Can I just offer one more thought after that? It would be just awesome if we could take advantage of what these other cities have learned and not have to take years and kind of, you know, use their intelligence and their knowledge and then apply it to our own. I mean, I'm very encouraged, so encouraged by the work Mikasa and Shay, you guys are doing, and also, or you gals, and also Daniel, your willingness to listen is really, really quite astounding and great to hear at a city level. So thank you.
I also wanted to just quickly add to that one of the things we could ask for, you know, is some kind of maybe permit fee reduction or, you know, those kinds of things I think would be great if it wasn't coming from just us, that we had other people asking for those things, because that's what they did in Portland. I think it was an impact fee waiver, which I've heard we can't ask for, but maybe we can ask for permit fees or something. I don't know. But or at least a reduction. But again, you know, we'll see how this unfolds. But go ahead, Bill.
Well, I wanted to piggyback on what Tree says. That's for people that have been on all these. I'm gonna sound like a broken record by somebody. All the things we do in these meetings aren't going to really impact us. If you're starting the project or if you're in the middle of the project, a lot of these things are not going to be affecting you because we are working for the future. I know, and I applaud Wesley and Shay for all the work they've done. Everybody that's involved in this, and Dan's help. I have a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. Dan, what you just said, that the mayor and council wanted you to come back in a year or two about some of this. Can we? I don't know why they would have to wait that long, because there are so many comments and questions and people's opinions about this, that I would hope that would be the next meeting that they would want to hear this instead of a year or two, because everything that's being brought up is legitimate questions and affects people going on right now. And if we're waiting a year or two, there's going to be thousands of ADUs, either permitted or not permitted, that are going to be built that will not be impacted by these changes. So that's one of my questions and comments. The other one is, can I ask, how long is this amnesty program going to be in effect? Is it indefinite, or is there a time frame where this ends?
So there was not a definite ending that was put on it when we went to them. There is a sunset date that was added. I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was 4 or 5 years. So you can naturally kind of October 2023. Is that right? So maybe yeah. So maybe it's sooner than I thought. Reviewing in 2022. So my memory is kind of confusing it with, I think, another project. I apologize.
Then my question is, does that encourage people to go unpermitted now and then wait for the next amnesty? Because I just don't want it to be unfair for the people that are permitting. I mean, I'm going through all the costs and paying everything to going through all this permitting, and I just don't. And I'm trying to ask about the funding for people that went unpermitted and they're in the amnesty. There's money for them to go through this. Does that apply for people that are permitting? Because that's the biggest question that everybody has, is how much is this going to cost? Can the city help us with the costs of permitting? But if there's money for people that in the amnesty program, is there money for people that are going through it the right way?
Yeah, so one thing you can do with that kind of keeps that from happening is you have a cutoff date to where when you set up the amnesty program, and maybe that happens in 2023 if we extend it, we say if you built it after a certain time. Thank you, Acacia, that's helpful. If you build it after it's been adopted or a certain date, then you wouldn't qualify for the amnesty program. We've had an issue with this in the city in the past to where, yes, exactly what you're talking about, Bill, happened. So that's something we should definitely look at. I appreciate the comment.
Well, then maybe you do it and wait 5 years and they'll do another amnesty program. See, that's the whole thing, that is, especially if it's cost benefit not to get permitted and then wait for the amnesty, and if they give you breaks on costs, then It seems like it kind of encourages that. And I agree that we should have an amnesty program, but it should, if you're going to give cost benefit to those people that are going through the amnesty, that cost benefit should automatically apply to people that are currently going through this process.
I think, Bill, I don't think you have to worry about it so much, honestly, because for me, it's gonna take you more time and cost to fix it after the fact than doing it right to begin with. Like, you're gonna be delayed, you're gonna have to do exploratory demo, you're gonna have to then pay for that demo to be repaired. Like, there's really no, it's not in anyone's benefit to try to fix it. It's way messier to try to fix it after the fact. So I don't feel like we have to worry about it too much.
I agree, but if there's money for people that are in the amnesty program, that money, something should be helping the people that are going through it the right way.
Yeah.
If there's money for those people, there should be money for us too, that are doing it the right way now.
Well, I mean, maybe that's where, like, really there was only going to be enough funding for a handful of projects. So more than likely, just in terms of the timeline, like, it's going to be easy to tell, if it looks like, it was constructed recently. They can even verify with aerial photos, Bill, now. So you can tell pretty easily year by year when something was built. So it's pretty hard to get away with it, honestly.
Well, I agree. It's just the big picture that if there's money out there, it should help. I mean, like everybody's asking, can they waive the permitting fees? Can they do this? And I know it's not going to happen now. Like I said, everything that we are talking about right now, all the people on here are benefiting the people that it's going to affect those people that are doing this in a couple of years. So we are all kind of guinea pigs, but it's something that it's good for people in the future. So we're all helping those people.
It definitely makes sense. We understand where you're coming from, Bill. Yeah, like there's a lot of it is 7:34. I am just gonna point that out. Teresa, it looks like you have one last question. I don't know if it's a really quick question, maybe we can cover it, or you could email later and I can forward it on.
Okay, I can do. Oh, so the quick question is this. I just want to make sure that I heard something correctly. So if it's an existing structure and you need to get it permitted, do you need to demolish a piece of it so that they can inspect it to get it permitted? Or am I making that story up?
That's kind of the story, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm like, I'm a little, you know what? And I'm like, oh dear, that could be really tricky.
So Teresa, it really depends on how it was built, how it's set up, that type of thing. So again, like I think my example was, having to remove a piece of drywall to see what the electrical is. So there are situations that in order to understand, how the electrical was done to make sure that it's not a fire hazard, they may require that type of thing. But it all really depends on, it's all site by site. That's what makes it so challenging.
But yeah, in interest, especially of our interpreters who have been kind of translating this the whole time, especially that last part, Teresa, and and to Dan and Acacia from the city who are here tonight supporting us. Yeah, I think we should close out. You can always reach out to the Mikasita ADU Gmail account with any further questions, and we'll try to connect you to resources. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to say, Shay, but otherwise I will just say goodnight and close out the call.